Hi, we are now on week 2 for our discussion in research and tourism, hospitality, and culinary. So, what are the things that we will discuss? Our main topic is research problem and objective. So first, we'll deal with how we will introduce our thesis or introduction or background of the study. The second part is research problem. Then we have research objectives, hypotheses to be tested, significance of the study, limitations of the study, and, well, definition of terms is simply just defining the terms that are colloquial or not familiar with some of the readers. Next, we have the course outcomes. What's the outcome of this topic or course? Is to provide a research proposal, create a research problem, and then create a background of the study or introduction. So what is an introduction? Right here in this slide, it simply says that it's a roadmap or a route planner for your thesis or your research study. So this will just like a movie, it will introduce what your topic or your research is about and what are the basic assumptions that you have or you made a research into why you wanted to go into this topic. So as you can see here, provided by Kellinger in 1973, the criteria for good research problems. So first is the problem should be expressed within a relation between two or more variables. So it has to have independent and dependent variable, just like what we discussed with the previous course. It should have two variables at least, one affecting the other, or a cause and effect. Second is state the problem in a question form because it is easier understood that way. Questions have the virtue of posing the problem directly. So it should be presented in a manner of a question. Next is variable problem should have an actual relation, but also the relation can be measured. That is what you will provide, a measurement or an analysis of the relationship between variable A and variable B, or an independent and a dependent variable. If this happens, what will happen? If this increase, will this decrease? If I do this, will it have an effect on this? If this effect is measured, what is provided? So that is what is meant by number 3. So rules in defining a research problem. Be sure that the topic that you choose is neither too vague or too broad in scope. Meaning, if it's too broad, you would have a hard time of doing the research, especially your research period, if your research period is just a short time. So you have to narrow your topics down. Even if it's a good topic, if it's broad enough, then you will not be able to finish your topic, and it would be hard for you to provide a sound conclusion. So second, state the problem as a question that will require a definite answer. So it should be answerable at the conclusion part. Third, carefully state the limits of the problem, eliminating all aspects and factors that will not be considered in the study. So just limit your study. Try to put in what is important and eliminate those that are not. So if you're just talking about a specific area regarding, for example, ecotourism, just focus on that area only. Then fourth, define any special term that must be used in the statement of the problem. So you could do this by providing definitions of terms after the statement of the problem. Next is the objectives. So objectives must be specific and achievable. Objectives set the stage for showing how one intends to solve or contribute to the solution of the problem. So remember, if you have a problem, you should have an objective on how you could answer that problem. The objectives must neatly fit into this problem statement. So if you have the specific problem of how, then probably in your objective you could put understand or identify how a solution will be presented. Now, there are sample objectives that we provided for you in your classroom, so please go to that reference. So if you have, it is a best practice wherein if you have 3 problems, then you also have at least 3 objectives that would answer your thesis problem. Next is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a conjectural statement of the relation between 2 or more variables. So in science, or when we were in elementary, normally hypothesis is what we call what was taught to us was hypotheses were educated guess. So similarly to the definition in thesis or research, it is also an educated guess. So hypotheses are statements about the relationship or relation between the variables that you're presenting. So if you're trying, for example, you're trying to determine an effect or a cause, or will this go up or down, you would already know, or you would already hypothesize that it will only go up or go down. So you could present that as your educated guess before the start or during the start of your research as part of your objective. So hypotheses carry clear implications for testing the stated relationships. So it means that the hypothesis presents an cause and effect for the 2 variables, an educated guess on where the variables will lead to. Why are our hypotheses important? Because at the conclusion, you would either reject or accept the hypothesis that you presented during the start of your thesis, or during the introduction part of your thesis. Now, just a word of caution, hypotheses are normally used or are used paired with quantitative researches. And qualitative research normally does not have any hypothesis because the knowledge comes from the participants. Therefore, you gather, in a qualitative study, you gather all of the knowledge, you gather all of your data through a participant, through a participant who's a subject matter expert. Quantitative data is just validating what you already know with your research. That's why you have a hypothesis there. So there are 2 types of hypothesis. You could fairly say, in layman's terms, this is a contrast between 2, a yes or a no, a negative and a positive, to simply put it. But you would call one of the hypotheses as null hypothesis, or signed as H0, is a non-directional statement of condition between 2 variables. It states that there is no significant differences or no significant difference between 2 parameters. So for example, there is no significant difference between the scores obtained by respondents who reviewed the presentation and the scores of the respondents who did not view the presentation. So this is a negative hypothesis or a null hypothesis, negating a result. Now, if you have a negation, you have a positive one, which is called a research hypothesis or an alternative hypothesis. Or if we sign it, it should be H1. is a directional statement of relationship between variables. It means that there is a direction or a correlation between two variables. For example, respondents who view the presentation will tend to obtain higher scores than respondents who will not view the presentation. So there are also examples in your classroom about hypotheses. So H1 and H0. H0 is a negation. H1 is positive, or there is a relationship between a variable. So, about importance of the study. It simply tells your readers, why is this study important? As you can see here in the slide. So, what are the examples for this? It should cushion your statement with guided phrases like, the result of this study would ... help, for example, the tourism industry, the culinary industry, the school, fellow researchers, contribute to a better understanding of the issues involved. So these are what makes or comprises your importance of the study. Next is limitations of the study. It may not sound helpful, but limitations of the study is one of the tools that you could use so that you don't go beyond what you're studying and you can put a fence somehow in your study. This section discusses the weakness of the study in terms of methodology and generalizability of the results to be obtained from the study. Most theses are limited by the size of sample, the locale of the research, and some other factors. What is the example? For example, I'm trying to study an effect of the pandemic here in the Philippines. That would be too broad because it would be hard for me to do a research that would comprise of the whole Filipino people's experience on COVID-19. What I can do is try to limit my study. What I can put in my limitations of study that I would only study students from Treston. Therefore, limiting my sample size. And then the locale of research, which is the demographic, local or demographic. And some other factors may be, I will just study women, for example. Students of Treston that are women. So you could put that in your limitation of the study. What other factors that you could put? Time frame. I only have 3 months to study. To conduct the study, I mean. So those are sample limitations of the study. This is very important because if you defend your research, this will enable to ground those that would be asking beyond your research. So if a panelist or a fellow researcher would ask, why didn't you do this? You could just point them to your limitation of the study. Because I only have 3 months to study this. I only conducted a study with male. I only conducted a study of current Treston students. Okay? So that's about it for this session. I'll see you next session.